Hello, students. Welcome again in the class of Muslim law. Today we are going to discuss sources of Muslim law, part 1. As far as the sources of Muslim law are concerned, there are two categories. The first one is primary sources, and the second one is secondary sources. Whenever we discuss sources of any law, it means we want to know about the original materials where the contents of that law are to be found. From this perspective, we will be discussing the primary and secondary sources. In today's video, we will be focusing on primary sources only. But there are two disclaimers. The first is that whatever we are going to discuss today is about a particular religion. And therefore, there are so many things which will become the part of today's lecture, which are the subjective opinion of a particular community. And it is very necessary to discuss these things, because otherwise we will not be able to explain those religious materials which are essentially part of today's lecture. The second disclaimer is that although so many subjective opinions will become the part of today's lecture, we will be discussing only those things which are essential from the point of view of law, not from the point of view of religion, essentially. Though it is, I know that it is very difficult to distinguish at times between law and religion, so far as today's topic is concerned. Now, what are primary sources of Muslim law? If somebody asks, what are the primary sources of Muslim law? Then the answer is, there are 4 primary sources of Muslim law. The number one, the Quran, the holy book, which Muslims consider as to be the book of God. The second one is Sunnah. It is also known as Ahadith. The word Ahadith is a plural term for what is known as Hadith. In English, we call it traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The third source is Ijma. In English, we call it consensus of opinion. And the fourth one is Qiyas. Again, in English, we call it analogical deduction. Secondary sources, which we will discuss in the next video in detail, are customs and usages, precedents, that means judicial decisions, and legislations. But we will be discussing about secondary sources in our next video. Today we are going to focus on primary sources only. Now let us talk about the first primary source. As I told you, the first primary source is Quran. You must have heard about this book. I'm sure at least you must be knowing the name of this book. Remember, there are so many words which are new for you, or at least most of you. And initially, you may find it difficult to comprehend those terms and especially to remember those terms. But don't, my advice to all of you is that please don't worry. Have patience with the passage of time. As you will go on studying Muslim law, you will start feeling comfortable with these terms, and gradually you will be able to memorize these terms. It has been my experience, so I am advising you on the basis of my experience. Now, what is Quran? Quran, according to the faith of Muslims, is the book of God. The word Quran has been derived from the Arabic word Qura, that means the reading or that which ought to be read. This is the dictionary meaning of the term Qura. Therefore, this book, which Muslims believe to be the book of God, book written by God, is to be read, is supposed to be read. This book was revealed over a period of 23 years. The first revelation, which Muslims believe, came in the year 609 AD, and it continued till 632 AD when Prophet Muhammad left for heavenly abode. Now, let us try to understand what are the salient features of this book. This book is considered to be of divine origin, as Muslims believe that this book is the book of God. Therefore, obviously, they consider it to be of divine origin. The second feature is that it is the first source of the religion and law. Religion, that means the religion of Islam and Muslim law. This is the first source. As far as the structure of this book is concerned, there are 114 chapters in this book, and there are more than 6,000 verses, which are known as, in Arabic and even in Urdu, we call it ayats. The verses are called ayats. This book is not the book of law only, but Quran is a mixture of law, religion, and morality. The next feature is that according to the faith of Muslims, this book is unchangeable, because they believe that this is the book of God. No human being has written it, therefore no human being can change it. So from their point of view, it is unchangeable. And the last one is that not the entire book is a source of law, but only there are about 200 verses which are considered to be law-making verses or ayats. Now, let us try to understand one by one what these salient features mean. As far as the divine origin is concerned, Muslims believe, as I told you, that this is the book of God, and therefore, according to their belief, it was revealed by God, and therefore it was written by God, and it wasn't written by any human being. It is also believed that it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for the benefit of mankind. So Muslims believe this book is not for the Muslims alone, but for the entire humankind. This book, according to the Muslims' belief, was revealed by God when God sent angel Gabriel, who is known as Jibrail, to Prophet Muhammad. And through angel Gabriel or Jibrail, in Arabic this name is pronounced differently. Gabriel is called Jibrail, and the verses were revealed to Prophet Muhammad from time to time through Jibrail or angel Gabriel. And thereupon, when the verses reached Prophet, he communicated those messages to the society through his preachings. Now, the next salient feature is it is the first source. Of course, the primary and fundamental source of Islam and Muslim law is the Quran, and that is why it is called the first and fundamental source of Islam and Muslim law in point of time. Because there were, according to Muslims' belief, other books were also revealed prior to Quran, but those books, the earlier scriptures, could not be saved in their original form. And therefore, finally, this book came, and this book, which is known as Quran, became the primary and the first and the fundamental source of Islam as well as Muslim law. As I told you about the structure of the book, this book has got 114 chapters, and there are more than 6,000 verses. As far as the chapters are concerned, the size of chapters are of varying nature. Some of the chapters are very big chapters. However, there are chapters in the Quran which are very small as far as the number of sentences are concerned. So, these chapters are not of the same size. They are of different size. As far as the ayats are concerned, I told you, there are over 6,000 verses. Quran is not a book of law only. And that is why it is said that it is a mixture of law, religion, and morality. Some of the verses were revealed at Makkah. Some of the verses were revealed at Medina. And it is believed that the verses of the Quran pertaining to religion and morality were revealed at Makkah, and those pertaining to law were revealed at Medina. Muslims consider that this book is unchangeable, because from their point of view, from their perspective, from their belief, as far as their belief is concerned, this is the book of God. So no human being has the authority to change it, and therefore it is unchangeable. And that is why, since it is the book of God, they consider it to be the most authoritative source of Muslim law. And as far as meaning of any specific verse is concerned, it is very important to note that if any specific meaning has been attributed to a particular verse of Quran, either by any Shia or by any Sunni authorities, then the courts have no power to give any other meaning to the verse. So only that meaning is to be taken into account, even by court, which has been attributed by Shia or Sunni authorities to that particular verse. How many verses are actually sources of Muslim law? If this question arises, then you must be clear about it, that not all the verses are the sources of Muslim law. There are only 200 verses scattered in different chapters, which are regarded as fundamental source of Muslim law. Now the second source, which is known as Sunnah or Ahadith. In English we call it traditions of the Prophet. I'll explain the meaning of the term traditions of Prophet what is the meaning of traditions of Prophet. But before that, a question arises, that is, why Sunnah or traditions of Prophet should be considered as the second source of Muslim law. Just after Quran, why Sunnah becomes the second source? It becomes because Quran itself says that whatever the Prophet gives, accept it, and whatever the Prophet forbids you, abstain from it. This statement is very clear. This statement I have given in this slide within inverted commas, it very clearly states that whatever the Prophet gives, accept it, and whatever the Prophet forbids you, abstain from it. So if he has given you by his words, by his deeds, or by his silent approval, that is very important. That becomes very important. And obviously, that cannot be ignored. So these things, whatever he said, whatever he did, and whatever he silently approved, is of great significance. And this is known as tradition of Prophet. Prophet himself has said once that so long as you hold fast two things which I have left among you, you will not go astray, God's book and his messenger's sunnah. This is a very famous saying of Prophet, where he said that if you hold fast two things which I have left among you, you will not go astray. While addressing his followers, he said that if you hold fast two things, you will not go astray, which I have left among you. And what are those things? The book of God, God's book, which is Quran, and his messenger's sunnah. That means sunnah comes just after the Quran. So from these two statements, one from Quran, the other from Hadith, it becomes very clear that Sunnah is the second source of Muslim law. Now anybody may ask, what is the meaning of Sunnah or a Hadith? Remember, there are compilations of ahadith, and I have given the name of few very famous compilations in the in these slides. We will come to that, and you will get to know those names also, where whatever Prophet said, did, or silently approved has been recorded. And Muslims look at those things from the point of view of great deal of faith and respect. For Muslims, those things are extremely respectable. They cannot ignore. So whatever Prophet said, did, or approved silently is recorded. Muslims have the compilations of these actions of Prophet Muhammad, and they depend on those things. So if somebody asks, what is the meaning of Sunnah? Then Sunnah is the basic principle or rule of law that emerges from a particular hadith. Hadith is a story. Hadith is a story of, it is a narration of a particular incident which took place during the life of Prophet Muhammad. And either his companions were present there, or somebody from his family was present there. He or she witnessed such incident, and then such incident was narrated to somebody else narrated to someone else, and then finally it got recorded. So this narration of a particular incident is known as hadith. The plural of hadith is ahadith. Whenever any rule emerges from a particular hadith, that is a narration of an incident, then that is known as sunnah. And in this way, sunnah becomes an integral part of any hadith. Remember, it is believed that Prophet Muhammad never said anything or did or approved anything which was not guided. He always said or did or approved anything by the guidance of God. So his actions were also inspired. They were derived from the inspiration from God. And therefore, Muslims believe that his sayings, his deeds, and his silent approvals are of great significance. One more thing to be noted is that these revelations, according to Muslims' faith, are of two kinds. The first is the direct revelation, the second is indirect revelation. The direct revelation became the part of Quran. Whatever was directly revealed through angel Gabriel or Jibrail to Prophet, that became the part of Quran. But indirect revelations, indirect means internal, not obvious revelations, became part of Sunnah. It is the faith of Muslims that Prophet Muhammad's words were also his words, his deeds, and his silent approvals were also form of revelation. He never did anything against what was said by God to him. And therefore, Sunnah is very important for Muslims. It became the second source in this way. Now, a question emerges: how many kinds of sunnahs are there? What constitutes sunnah? Sunnah can be classified in three categories. Sunnah may be called sunnatul qawl. That means words spoken. Whatever Prophet spoke, whatever his utterances or sayings were there, this is called sunnatul qawl. Whatever he did, his doings or behavior, is a part of sunnatul fail. That means conduct. And the third one is whatever he silently approved is called sunnatul taqrir. So whatever he said, whatever he did, and whatever he silently approved becomes part of sunnah. Therefore, sunnatul qawl, sunnatul fail, and sunnatul taqrir are the part of sunnah. Now, how these sunnah were recorded? A very important question arises. These sunnah were recorded with the help of some narrators. The incidents were narrated by somebody, but who narrated them? What is the qualification for a competent narrator? Who can narrate an incident? In this slide, I have explained the preachings and precepts could become an authoritative source of law when some competent or qualified person called narrator had narrated it. According to Abdul Rahim, a famous writer who has written a very famous book on Muhammadan jurisprudence, he says that a person must possess the following qualifications for being a competent narrator. He must be a Muslim. He must have understanding. That means he must be a sane or an adult person. He must possess the power of retention, and he must be of righteous conduct as well. If, if one had these four qualifications, one was fit to become a narrator of a tradition. There are so many people who have narrated the traditions, and there is another way of classification of traditions. In this slide, I have explained some of the ahadith are called ahadith mutawatir. These are those ahadith which are universally accepted. Continuously, they have been reported or narrated by many people. Muslims believe in these ahadith and traditions. There are some popular traditions also which are known as ahadith mashhur, traditions narrated by companions, secondary but subsequently accepted by large number of people. These are also very important ahadith. The third one is ahadith isolated traditions, neither continuous nor followed by majority of people. Only certain sections of society have accepted them as source of law. So this is also one way of classifying ahadith. As I told you that there are many compilations. If somebody asks me or anyone who is teaching Muslim law as to where can one find these ahadith in order to ascertain the sunnah, is there an authoritative compilation? The answer is yes. There are many compilations of ahadith. I have given the names of few ahadith in this, a few compilations of ahadith in this slide. There is one compilation called Muwatta. It was compiled by Malik ibn Anas. There is another compilation called Masnad. This was compiled by Ibn Hanbal. There is very famous compilation which is respected all over the world. It's called Sahih Bukhari. This is the name of the book. This was compiled by a person whose name was Imam Bukhari, a learned author. Sahih Muslim. This is also a very popular and dependable compilation. This is known as Sahih Muslim, which was compiled by one gentleman, one learned author whose name was Imam Muslim. So these are the compilations where anybody can find the ahadith. And from those ahadith, which as I told you, are the narration of some incident, one can ascertain what the sunnah is. In any story, if any principle of law emerges, that principle or rule of law is known as sunnah. Therefore, today's lecture ends. In the next video, we will be discussing secondary sources of Muslim law and some other things also. Maybe I'll talk about schools of Muslim law also. But since schools of Muslim law are not in your syllabus, therefore we will be discussing schools of Muslim law in very brief, only to the extent it is required. Of course, I know that schools of Muslim law must be taught, but since it is not in the course, I'll tell you about the schools also to the extent it is required, so that you may be able to understand Muslim law further when we will be dealing with Muslim law in detail. Thank you very much.